Hi, my name's Scott Case. I'm a fire investigator with South Metro Fire.
Metro Fire, what is the address of the emergency?
What's on fire? Multiple calls reporting flames coming from the roof. LPDs arriving on scene stating fire in the stairwells as well.
Multiple callers, flames seen coming out of the unit. Household parties trapped. There's an older lady that lives there. She's not seen. Right, medium-sized, two-story multi-family. We have smoke and flames showing. Alpha side. WSM command. We're manning the offensive strategy. We do have extension to the second floor. Headed to the third. Let's go ahead and start the second alarm.
34, Tower 35, Ladder 12, along 11, Engine 42, Engine 38, Engine 42, Medic 211, Medic 21, Battalion Chief 3, Battalion Chief 5, Safety 35, Netcom Op 3, confirmed multi-family structure fire.
As an investigator, I respond to fires that have already happened and figure out where and how they started, and if in fact somebody set the fire, gather evidence so that we can build a criminal case and prosecute them in the future. So I'm going to take you around my truck. Basically the things you'll see here are just for that. It's for investigating a fire, so I have largely equipment for protecting myself, equipment for documenting the scene, and then equipment for digging out evidence and preserving it. The front seat of my truck's pretty standard. I have an MDT in here, radios, flashing lights, just like what you would expect to see in any sort of emergency vehicle. There's nothing really in here that is specifically related to investigations, and all of our investigations vehicles look pretty much like this in the front seat. So the back seat is sort of my office. We have probably my two most used pieces of equipment in here are my camera and my clipboard. So we document everything that we do, everything that we see, both in writing and photographically. So this is where I do most of my work, and this is kind of where I work out of when I'm at a scene. I also carry in here all kinds of different forms for the paperwork that we do. I have instruments in here so that I can check on electrical issues. I can check on the atmospheric content, just like the firefighters carry, to make sure it's safe for us to be inside, and various other things to help my job go faster. So the cameras we carry are just like anybody else would carry if they went on vacation or if they like to take good pictures. So it looks just like it is, like you would get at the store. This one happens to be a Nikon camera, pretty standard lens on it. And it's a digital camera, so that everything we archive is digitally. We stopped using film probably 20 years ago because it's much faster and I can take as many pictures as I want. We take pictures of the entire scene from the outside in. We want to document the condition that it was in when we found it, and be able to reproduce, if we have to in court, the exact sequence of events, or what our investigation leads us to believe is the sequence of events. So we'll take whole pictures of the scene, right down to very small pictures of where we think the fire started, whether we find matches or electrical wiring or things like that. In this compartment we have mostly just big hand tools. I mentioned earlier that we dig out in our scene. Sometimes we have to dig down through the debris to find the actual place where the fire started. So we carry things like shovels and pry bars, even little hammers. Also in this compartment you'll see that I have a whole collection of gloves. That's to keep me safe, because as you can imagine, fire scenes are a little bit dirty. So moving around to the back of the truck, this is kind of a combination of things. As I said before, we have equipment back here to keep us safe. So this is my SCBA. The breathing apparatus, it's exactly the same as what the firefighters wear. Each one of those bottles will give me about 45 minutes in a hazardous environment. So I can work inside. If it's unsafe to breathe just through a regular filter mask, I can still work inside and take pictures and do what I need to do. I also have back here bags of protective gear. So I have bunker gear that's just exactly like what you would see the firefighters wear at the scene, other than the fact it says fire investigator in big letters on the back. And then I have various tools back here. I have toolboxes full of wildland gear, so when we go to investigate wildland fires or grass fires, brush fires. I have regular tools in here that are things like hammers and wrenches and little pry bars and stuff like that. I even actually have power tools in here, battery-powered power tools. Should I have to remove part of a floor or part of a wall, I have a little chainsaw or other tools that I can use to do that. I also have back here some lighting kits, because oftentimes we get called in the middle of the night, and even when it's not in the middle of the night, it's often dark inside a burned building because there's no electricity and everything inside is black. So we carry lighting kits that look like this, that are just simply a big light. It sets up on a big tripod and gives us scene lighting within the building when it's dark. And then the other thing I carry back here, I mentioned earlier, if we have to collect evidence for a criminal case, we have to have a way to secure it and send it to a lab in order to have it processed. So for instance, if we think that something had gasoline poured on it or something along those lines, we have a series of different sized cans and evidence bags. So if we find something that we believe was contaminated with gasoline, we'll seal it inside this can and then seal that can inside an evidence bag so that we can transport it to the proper lab. Ideally, we like not to work in an SCBA because it means it's heavier or we're limited in the amount of time that we have. So most of the time we'll use this when the fire is either not necessarily still going, but there's still smoke in the building and the situation is dangerous. With the device I showed you earlier, that yellow meter, once we determine that the oxygen level and there's no dangerous chemicals in there in the atmosphere, then we can use what we call a half mask, and it's just that. It covers our nose and mouth, has a couple of filters on either side, and that allows us to stay in there as long as we want. The filters will take out any remaining smoke, carcinogens, whatever we may kick up while we're digging around, but that allows us to work for long periods of time and not have to worry about either running out of air or wearing ourselves out carrying this around. And then finally on this side, we just have a collection of some other tools that we use. You know, I have a wrench set here. I've got another, this is the battery packs for all of the power tools I showed you earlier. This kit here just contains some electrical meters and things so we can verify that the power is off before we start going and messing with wires. And then a little more evidence collection material, so we have ways of labeling our evidence and sealing it so that we can send it along to the proper lab or wherever it needs to be processed. Our vehicle necessarily has a lot of electrical devices, so in addition to the MDT, the data terminal that tells us about the calls, we also have flashlights, flashlight chargers, and other tool chargers in here. So we have to keep these things plugged in when they're parked because a single car battery isn't going to be capable of keeping all of those charged and start when we need it. So among the safety equipment that we carry, we have this bucket here that contains decontamination equipment, because just like the fire crews, we end up in dangerous atmospheres. So not just lack of oxygen, but also products of combustion. Our entire world is made out of plastic, and when plastic burns, you don't want that kind of smoke to get inside of you. So when we get done with our investigations, we carry buckets full of gear, just it's brushes and bags to put our gear in and things like that, just so that we can clean ourselves off and not to take this stuff home with us. And so now you've seen the inside of an investigation vehicle. Thanks for joining us on Fleet Friday.